Today, we expect absolute certainty before locking someone away. We rely on DNA, cameras, and precise forensic science. But imagine if all of that evaporates. In medieval Europe, life was incredibly hard, and the kingdoms fighting for control were highly unstable. Leaders faced a massive crisis. They had absolutely no scientific way to prove who committed a crime. This balance scale illustrates the core problem: an evidence deficit. There was a massive gap between an accusation and the state's ability to prove it. You had a heavy charge on one side and practically nothing on the other. To keep society from falling apart, rulers found a workaround. Without objective proof, they substituted certainty with overwhelming psychological fear. We often view medieval punishments as random emotional acts of cruelty. In reality, they were highly calculated, engineered systems designed specifically to fill the void of missing evidence. To see how this system was actually manufactured, we have to look away from the town square and step deep underground. Beneath the fortresses, isolated in the dark, authorities built private chambers dedicated to legally bypassing the need for evidence entirely. This is the rack. To authorities, it was the ultimate bureaucratic tool for forcing a confession. A prisoner was strapped by their wrists and ankles. As handles turned, ropes wound around those heavy wooden rollers, pulling the body until joints dislocated. Long before their bones cracked, most people reached a psychological breaking point. To stop the unbearable agony, prisoners would invent wild stories or name completely innocent neighbors as accomplices. For the authorities, this created a self-contained loop. The torture guaranteed that someone would confess, and legally, that confession closed the case. It made the justice system brutally efficient, regardless of the actual truth. But not all justice happened in the dark. For minor offenses, the state pulled the entire town square into the process, turning punishment into a mass public spectacle. The pillory might look less lethal, but its true danger came from weaponizing the local community. Locked by the neck and wrists, the victim was defenseless. Crowds threw rotting food and heavy stones, severely injuring a person who couldn't raise a hand to block them. This was an incredibly clever administrative trick. By using public humiliation, the authorities effectively outsourced law enforcement to the mob, encouraging the lower classes to police and punish each other. Threats against the crown or the church, like treason and heresy, triggered a completely different response. The state needed to answer with overwhelming force. One method was the gibbet cage. Hoisted high above the ground near main roads, it served as a territorial warning for approaching travelers. The condemned were locked inside those tight iron bands, facing slow starvation and extreme elements over agonizingly long days. For the worst offenders, punishments like drawing and quartering, or burning at the stake, were used to completely erase a person from existence, dragging them through the streets before a final, fiery execution. These extreme executions had very little to do with the individual criminal. They were massive, highly visible messaging campaigns, engineered to deter anyone else from even thinking about rebelling against the kingdom. Because this entire system relied on fear instead of hard evidence, it suffered from a devastating flaw. Countless innocent people were routinely dragged into the machinery of punishment. With no need for forensic science, simple personal rivalries or neighborhood disputes became lethal. A false accusation was often all it took to send a rival to the rack or the pillory. This timeline illustrates how society eventually reached a breaking point. As legal philosophy evolved over centuries, courts started demanding objective standards of evidence, officially beginning the long process of closing that medieval evidence deficit. The brutal devices of the era were retired, dismantled, and eventually moved into museums. But the absolute terror they inflicted left a permanent scar on human history. Our modern legal system is far from perfect, but it is built on the rigorous pursuit of objective proof. It stands as a direct, hard-won rejection of a world ruled by the architecture of fear.